Hello and welcome to the Psych Channel. I'm your host Toby, and today I want to present you my first of the Misconceptions series, and it is about computer games. Well, what a wonder. Since I have a gaming channel, I thought that would be a good opener. And what do we have? What do we know about computer games? Well, what do we hear about computer games? We hear computer games make kids violent. That's very interesting, but false. Now, we all know the stories, we all seen the headlines. Of course, all the school shootings is all caused by violent computer games. But that's actually not true. What we do know from research about computer games is that the effect of video games violence is insignificant in comparison to other factors. So what does that mean? If I look at violence in kids, I have to look at what causes actually the violence. And there's a lot of very interesting research design that will help me to figure out what actually causes violence. And it turns out that if I count for all the other factors, they are way more predictable. Things like bullying, things like violence witnessed in the home, like domestic violence, like yelling at each other. Very important, parents, listen up. If you yell to each other in front of your kids, you cause your kids to be the same way. It's always that good saying, right? Do as I say, not as I do. That's what we tell our kids, but in all honesty, they copy us. The kids are little mini-me's. They do exactly or very closely things what we show them how we act. Then, the more you play violent games, the less it bothers you. That is always a little bit misinterpreted in the public media. That means like, oh, you get just numb to violence. Well, yeah, numb to violence in computer games. Makes sense, right? Because I'm concentrating not on the violence in a computer game, especially in a shooter. I'm concentrating on getting the objective done. And it just, I care less if I shoot somebody, honestly, in like Counter-Strike, which I'm actually not playing, but I play the Division, and I don't care if I shoot the bad guy or not. It's actually, I want to get the points for it. So that's what I'm concentrating on, and I'm less bothered by it than somebody who plays less of the violent computer games because for them it's more novelty, something new, something they have to get used to. But honestly, gamers are strategic. They think about the goal and goal-oriented playing, and they just get less bothered by it. Now, I will talk a little bit later about why that is, but let's go to the next point. Desensitized but no difference in arousal. That goes about the same. That also means that what somebody did there is they modded computer games, made them different in violence and different in how hectic it gets or how many tasks you have to do at the same time or how fast it basically the pace and the violence. And they found out that yes, the desensitization happens, but the arousal, what we always think of, the cause for all the aggression that you get hyped up, that is not a change. So that is the same in violent and non-violent settings. Then all the experts agree violent media increases aggression. What I'm saying here is that pediatricians, psychiatrists, counselors per se agree on that violent media increases aggression. Now look at this media. That is everything together, like violent movies and violent computer games, violent pornography, whatever. Yes, increases aggression. However, this is an opinion poll. And when that is presented in the media as, look, they all agree, that is the same as everybody agreed before Freud came around that hysteria, being hysterical, can only be have by women because literally means a wandering womb, hysteria, right? So that's where it came from. And Freud was the first one saying, no, 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 no. It's different. It is unsolved unconscious issues. It's something in the mind. That was a novel idea. Everybody was like, no, 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 you're nuts. You don't know anything. Now, Freud was a medical doctor, and he pretty much knew that the womb was not wandering around. So, same thing with Semmelweis. He said, all these women dying after birth is because the doctors don't wash their hands. Doctors all, no, 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 no. That's not what it is. They just get sick. It is not us because we don't make people sick. We make people healthy. Well, it turns out midwives that wash their hands did not cause the same amount of death. So he was right. And it took a while until that changed. So just because experts agree out of a gut feeling doesn't mean anything, especially when it comes to that topic. So, real world. No correlation between game sales and crime rates. That's a biggie. So, if it would be true that violent computer games would cause violence, then we would have to see an increase after releases of violent computer games like Grand Theft Auto 5. Actually, what we see is the opposite. Why do we see the opposite? Well, because most people play computer games, especially the guys that would cause crimes, would break in and stuff. Now, a new game comes out, and where are they? They're on their Xbox, they're on their PlayStation, they're on their computer and playing these games. And I will get to that a little bit later too. When controlled, violence seems to have no effect on aggression. That's, I think, the last argument. And that was done by researchers that controlled for everything, made a game that is pretty much the same, except for the violence. Turns out, when that happens, you do not have any significant effect size on aggression. And that's on the normal population, and that is an important part to think about. So, then, next one, computer games decrease social interaction. That kind of notion about nerds sitting at home, don't have any friends. Yeah, very interesting. However, if you look at TED Talks, and TED Talks are really a trove of information that is really well presented and always worth watching. Actually, when I'm driving somewhere, I'm on my own, I have a TED Talk playing on my podcasts, and I really enjoy it because they really have all kinds of different ideas they present. Now, Mrs. McGonigal, she presented 2010 a TED Talk about gaming can make a better world. She has a PhD and she's a game designer. And she shows in her TED Talk that gamers are collaborating, and she did it on back then World of Warcraft. They are empowered by the game. They learn problem solving. It has a social fabric behind it. They're productive when they do that. All the things that we associate with not not really with gaming, right? That's usually something where we think like, oh yeah, he's volunteering a lot of hours at the whatever local soup kitchen or something. But actually, we do that in games too, and we actually play quite a bit. Really, I encourage you to watch that TED Talk. Just look it up, Google it, and you will be pleasantly surprised. Then also, Mrs. Belvier in 2012 TED Talk explained that in the West, 90% of kids and 70% of adults play computer games. Now, 90% is a conservative estimate. I've seen actually other TED Talks that talked about up to 97%. It really depends on what population you look at. Western world, pretty much, also the Eastern world, like the rich countries, where money is not an issue to get a game console, even if it's an older one. That's where you see these numbers. You won't see it in areas where, hunger is the main concern. And the average age, it's not the kids. It's actually us, adults that play on average. And the future will be actually the elderly because what do they have? A lot of time on their hand. And I played World of Tanks for quite a while. I had a lot of clanmates that were actually elderly. Well, not elderly, but around 50 and older. And that's just because they identified with, they were former tankers, etc. Anyways, what is the result of that? Well, gamers actually do have better vision than people that don't play. They can see details better and nuances. Actually, they even score better on the vision test. They have a better attention, not a worse attention, and conflict resolution is one of them. And I don't mean the conflict resolution as in two people are arguing and they know how to argue better. It's more like if you have a conflict of information coming in, you can resolve better which things you have to pay attention to. Okay, so even though you're not supposed to talk on a phone and drive, gamers can actually do that better because if they get different cues, and I mean the gamers that play FPS and action games, they have conflicting cues what to pay attention to. They are trained in prioritizing quicker what is important. So your cell phone falls down and the person in front of you hits the brakes, you know that hitting the brakes is more important than getting that phone in this moment. You can make these split-second decisions better because you were trained in that in the games, right? There's a grenade falling next to you and somebody is trying to shoot you. This kind of things that happen in the game. Okay, better mental orientation. Well, of course, you have to learn all these maps in these action games when you play them a lot, and you always know where you are. Goes to the point that you actually translate that into your real life, and you actually do better there too. And there is a difference between doing action games and doing social media, especially with confidence in multitasking. Goes back to that conflict resolution I'm talking about earlier. The people that do a lot of social media do a lot of these little cell phone games like Candy Crush and so on, have a high confidence that they're really good at multitasking and they're totally overestimating their capabilities compared to gamers that actually do have these capabilities if you play these action and FPS games. And that's really done in lab tests. That's not something that I've just made up. You can see her TED Talk. Really, it was an enjoyable one. And then some games form complex social communities with subgroups. Think of it. Guilds, clans, corps, whatever. It depends on which game you play, what they're called. But you know, you're on your Ventrilo, on your TeamSpeak, even on Skype sometimes, and you coordinate things. And that goes for all kinds of games. That's not only the shooters, right? I was one time playing, oh, what was that? A browser game where we actually had a Skype chat to coordinate our attacks on the browser game. It just happens. That's how these communities form, and these communities form real life events on massive scales. PAX, well, is it's more a trade show, but a lot of gamers actually meet there, right? They know each other online and they come to these. And the Gamescom, I was at the first and second Gamescom when it was still in Leipzig, Germany. Actually, backstage, I was on the professional days there when you still could actually get to every stand. CitizenCon for Star Citizen, E3, which is again a trade show, more of the um, entertainment industry. But you have these sub meetings there, you have these LAN parties there. Look at LAN parties, look at esports. People meet at these things. And developers also sometimes have like days where they want to go out with their fans and so on and say, here, come there, we'll meet you there. These things are really happening and they impact real life friendships. I know people that visited each other across states just from, they only know each other from games, but they found a common interest and it's a part of their life. And that's what we do as gamers. We build communities, we have friendships, and they're not just virtual. I mean, I hate when people say that's just a virtual friendship. What's the difference? What's the difference if I see somebody and talk to them or online? You know, I get to know them too. I know if they have kids, what they do, if they're retired, if they, I learned these things, and I wish them well. They wish me well. It is the same kind of thing. And at one point, people meet in real life. Now, people got married over that, right? We know all these stories. I mean, they're not the normal ones, but they still happen. And sometimes people are so remote that that might be the only way that they can socialize. Okay, games and addiction. Oh, that's a bad one though. That is absolutely possible because games distract from the real world. Big thing about addictions is it has to have an impact, right? And if it distracts from the real world and you can escape, you find your escape in a game, it can do that. Absolutely. Games have rewards. Well, anything that is addicting has to have some side of reinforcement, and games do that very well. Now, actually, all games are designed to do that because they want to draw you in, right? And only if you have the rewards, you will continue to play this game. Games are immersive, absolutely. Think about it, like these worlds, like World of Warcraft, these MMOs, they're very immersive. And you can get yourself lost in it. Time flies by. But that's just how it is. And games are pervasive. You can get games going anywhere. And think about the apps that they have for phones for games. One of the big players in that one is Ubisoft, right? They have the companion apps for all their Assassin's Creed series. They had it for what was that? Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs had a app where you actually were interacting either on a tablet or on a phone with players that were playing it at the same time. So it was really pervasive. And these things happen. But here's the big one: anything and addiction. Because when we look when we look at addiction itself, it's not about games, guys. Absolutely not. If I look of what can get me addicted, right? So let's start with the most obvious. Alcohol. It is the same way, right? It has a reward. I'm getting drunk, I feel good, and I can forget my daily life that's going on that might be really miserable. And that's why people drink too much. Um, Big thing about addiction is that yes, it has something to do with social life. It has something to do with that they have a need to fill, and they find this need filled by, for example, alcohol. Um, Now, everything I mentioned about the games that is addictive basically can be found in alcohol as well. Now, what's the next one? All kinds of other drugs. Any drug will fulfill that. And when we look at addiction itself, it comes from a need of belongingness that we have, right? A need for being a part of a group. And sometimes we don't feel like a part of a group, and that can have all kinds of different reasons. Trauma, trauma in your life, bullying, all kinds of things. They drive us into some sort of escape, and this escape can be found in games, but it can be found in alcohol, and it can be found in drugs. So that is the real reason when we look at what causes addictions. It is not that it's the game design, right? We try to blame the computer games here for the kids not going to school. We don't look at what is going on in school. Why are kids not wanting to go to school? Like I I was seriously playing in high school. I mean I was probably playing more on computer games than being in school time. And I was also active in politics and constantly on all kinds of things. Um, Now, did that keep me from having a social life? Absolutely not. Actually, it was a big part of it. I was on LAN parties almost every weekend, and met with friends in the basement of their parents' house, or we went to churches that had like community rooms with enough power outlets, and we were playing all weekend. I mean, we took all weekenders. We were playing all through the night. Now, why was it not addictive? Well, To be actually an addiction, it has to interfere with your normal life. So, be it the social life, that would be the loners, right? That would be the people that get bullied. And to escape that, they play computer games. It could be your work life. You lose your job over playing too much and not doing your job. That could be it. And these are the things, or it could be the private life, your sexual life, that just is negatively impacted by addictions. And then the last one here is, of course, prescription drugs. That is one of the growing concerns in the Western world, that things like painkillers, like anxiety pills, get abused as drugs. Again, has just something to do with social interaction. If you look at Portugal after the 2009 crisis, they had a huge addiction problem, and they found out they can't afford the legal system to it. So they found out, they went to the bottom of it and found out it is that people could not reconnect to their normal life. They couldn't get a job, they couldn't have friends, they were ostracized for being addicts, and that caused such a strain in the society that they decriminalized it mostly and helped people to get back on their feet. And all of a sudden, they had a big change in society, less addiction. Now, it's really at my heart that we understand that addiction is not something typical to games, to drugs, to prescription drugs, even pornography, all kinds of other addictions. Um, these addictions happen because they fill a void, and we have to work as a society on not having people in that void. That is what keeps people from addictions, not the absence of substances, absence of games. They will find something, right? And back to the violence part. Now, all the mass murderers or serial killers, you know what they have in common? Yes, it is violence. It's true. But it's pervasive in everything they do. And that's the difference. Just because you do play a computer game that's violent does not make you a killer. It is a lot of factors that are in all the things you do in undertone, and that's what I want to leave you with. The games are not what we think they are, and they are just as good or as bad as everything else we have in our society. And last but not least, I want to leave you with the sources that were mentioned in the PowerPoint slide about all the misconceptions about computer games. So here they are. It's not all what I'm saying. That is what other people found out. I just collected it and I presented it to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time on the Psych channel.